should solve the, so to say, impact categories: land use, conservation, and business opportunities is somewhat interesting. This is not the impact of the environment, but we place this way. And each item has 5 stages. And then what we can check. In the design, we check the deliverables produced by design process, the output of design, and the procurement, the raw materials parts used in the procured goods, and manufacturing and production itself, and transportation, and the operation is a service or maintenance, and disposal, of course, the use recycle. And we completed the checklist like this, and we organize this in such a way that we can show the result in a radial chart like this one. And what from point 0 to 5 is defined in the checklist. And the very interesting result we have is that we have a team with different sectors, and each sector tried to do the checklist, and we find the final result somewhat different from sector to sector. In case of manufacturing, electric manufacturers like us, electric appliance manufacturers like us, have a tendency to make this kind of form in the radial chart. Disposal and reuse is very large because I think this is specific to Japanese one as well as Korea. But design, we have to try more. And then in case of chemical, pharmaceutical ones, the manufacturing is especially in high score. And the construction company, it is well balanced. And so the service, transportation is small, but it's not a problem. But use and operation, the highest mark there. So there is a difference from sector to sector. So I think that, in a sense, this radial chart can be useful for them to identify what area should they improve and what area should they be proud of. And the final case is very specific to Hitachi. We are an ICT company. So we try to utilize information communication technology for some of the system conservation. And actually, we have an area of having a large number of factories in the central part of Japan, coastal area, which is called Hadano City. And in that city, we started a experimental village utilizing IT technology, and in cooperation with Kanagawa Prefecture government and the Hadano city government. And we do many trials to find out some new findings and future potential of utilization of the methodology using IT technology. And displaying the village temperature. Yes, by the way, this is a picture of the village, and the remote monitoring system can catch those wild animals, so we can monitor how many are there recently. And on the website, if you can read Japanese, you can even right now check the website like this. And this is an online system showing you. And the left-hand side up is the area of the water, the water temperature here, around here. And this is as well the temperature, but not water, but the land. And so this temperature are all of them, the different areas. And also some, I think, that humidities and those. And this is a real-time image of the place. And we also recently introducing satellite imagery. I think that there is a good possibility to monitor the map of the trees, the different kinds of trees within this area, utilizing the satellite map and other monitoring devices. So this is everything that I can show you, and that means that we are just the intermediate level of struggling to find out our own way of tackling with the biodiversity ecosystem conservation. Thank you very much.
you, Mr. So 2 minutes time. I would like to receive 1 or 2 key questions to Mr. Professor Kim. We need the microphone.
My name is Eun-si Kim from Kookmin University, South Korea, and I am working for the ecology of the society in Korea. And then it's very good to hear about the biodiversity and the corporate role, especially in terms of the Hitachi's approach for biodiversity and ecosystem services. I was much impressed by your environmental vision, saying that 3 goals of preventing global warming about the CO2, and then also conservation of resources. That's very important resources. But you mentioned that you have some difficulties in finding the preservation of ecosystems when reducing negative effects of air, water, and soil. Where I found that's about the abiotic environment, that means not living environment. When we think about biodiversity and ecosystem services, we should think about living environment. That is about plant, animals, microorganisms. So I think that you might put some more emphasis about those living environment, where could be the contribute to the biodiversity and ecosystem services. So I think that that's the kind of the gap or challenge areas for your region and your companies. So
maybe we have another session for discussion.
Okay.
If you can make a very short question.
Yes, sir. So the question is that, do you have any further plan to support such an areas like AP bond, like which Japan Ministry of Environment take initiative in supporting those observation of biodiversity in the region of Asia Pacific? That's my question. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much for your nice suggestion. That I think I agree with you. The living things monitoring is the most difficult thing, and I think it is a bit far from our activities. If we are a farming company, we're directly interacting with living things, but most of our activities are not. So this would be the gap, as you indicated. And by the way, your question about monitoring those living things and dealing with them will be kind of a national level project. And in that, construction companies are quite active. And I think that our company can provide our IT systems or monitoring systems to monitor those things, especially satellite. And at the same time, I think I heard from many experts that there would be a mathematical model of converting land use, for example, to the number of living things. So I'm investigating the possibility of those parameters and equation mathematical models to combine our activity and the living things situation. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, maybe next we will have our next discussion. Thank you. Okay, so next speaker we have from America, Dow Chemical Corporation. We are going to hear about the activities in ecosystem conservation from Mr. Mark White, Director of Sustainability Program. Please welcome him.
Thank you very much, Professor. Thank you for the opportunity to speak today. Thank you to Samsung Global Environment Research Center for supporting this and for hosting this. I very much appreciate this. I have the privilege of directing sustainability programs for the Dow Chemical Company, including being the project director for Dow's collaboration with the Nature Conservancy on valuing ecosystem services. I'd like to give you a little bit of background on why Dow entered this collaboration, and then give you some highlights of what we've been able to accomplish and what we'll be doing over the next five years, including what we have just done over the last year and a half with the collaboration. If I talk with you a little bit about what Dow does, we are a science and technology leader that sells a lot of chemicals and plastics all around the world. If I talk with you about the Nature Conservancy, I would tell you that they are a science and technology leader that conserves a lot of land and biodiversity around the world as well. So there's some very natural synergy between the two organizations, both being science-based organizations. To give you some background on why Dow is interested in biodiversity, ecosystems, and ecosystem services, I want to give you a little bit of background on what we do in the chemical industry, including Dow Chemical and a lot of other companies that manufacture chemicals. We use a lot of energy, take basic raw materials, and turn them into the goods and products and services that we use for modern life. If we look at the scale and scope of the Dow Chemical Company, we use as much energy as the continent of Australia, and we use the feedstocks and energy output of a medium-sized OPEC member. So you can imagine a pipeline coming from Qatar or from Venezuela into the Dow Chemical Company. This is the size and the scope of what we are doing as a company. Our corporate strategy is aligned with sustainability, because we care about the planet that we share, but also because we want to be sustainable as a company. We want to sustain our company's success into the future. We are a 115-year-old company, and we're planning to be here for the next 115 years as well. And so our mission, our vision, our strategy, our values, as well as our 4 strategic themes all include sustainability. And this sustainability theme was expressed in 2006 when we set our next set of 10-year goals, our second set of 10-year goals, out to 2015 around sustainability. With the hub of this wheel, the core of what we do being more sustainable chemistry, because the vast majority of products for modern life are enabled by chemistry. We are also active in addressing climate change, in reducing our energy output, reducing our energy input, and improving our energy efficiency, in product safety leadership and contributing to the success of the communities in which we live, protecting those communities, as well as working on breakthroughs to world challenges like were identified in the Millennium Development Goals. And so, for example, earlier this year we announced a breakthrough in what we call omega-9 oils, which have already reduced more than 1 billion pounds of bad fats from Western diets. As we continue to look at our approach to sustainability, we looked at something that we were frankly missing in our approach to sustainability, and that was valuing nature, valuing ecosystems, and valuing ecosystem services. Why did we start to care more about nature than we already had? We were already very concerned to protect nature at a local level, where our plants are, where our communities were. Why are we more concerned about nature on a larger scale? The answer becomes very simple. From a business perspective, we need access to ecosystem services over the long haul. We do care about the intrinsic value of nature, but yet we need to make sure that the systems and the goods that nature provides, those ecosystem services, are going to be available to us as humans and to us as a company over the long term. We also wanted to make sure that we aligned our products and services into the future to the growing needs for protecting biodiversity and ecosystems. We also realized that many of our large-scale projects would be benefited by taking into account ecosystem services as we plan them and as we work with a variety of stakeholders to make sure that they will agree with the projects that we want to work on. In our expansions and our permitting processes, we found that we needed to pay attention to the ecosystems and the services they provide. We've also found some examples that I'll share with you in a moment of how green infrastructure can help us and benefit us on the bottom line for how we do our work as a chemical company. We're also interested in making sure that we understand the ecosystems as we do remediation on sites, as well as how we do our conservation activities, and recognition of the offsets and payments for ecosystem services on land that Dow owns. This all became a very compelling argument for Dow to get involved in this, but we recognized a few years ago that we're a company of chemists and engineers. And quite frankly, we needed help to be able to understand this issue very well and to be able to work profitably on this issue. And so we turned to the Nature Conservancy, who is a leading non-government organization that has indeed seen success in conserving nature. They are science-based and have hundreds of scientists on staff. Scientists that we are learning from now as we investigate the science behind preserving nature, behind preserving biodiversity, behind preserving ecosystems, and preserving access to those ecosystem services that form the major business interest for us. We've had some experience with this on small scales before. This is one example from some of our Texas operations where we recognized the need for us to build a wastewater treatment facility. And when we considered options for that wastewater treatment facility, we had two basic options. We could build a traditional engineering solution, a gray infrastructure solution, so to speak, to that problem. And that estimate for capital was about $40 million. We also looked at some land that we had available to us and recognized that if we restored a wetland, we could do that for about $1 to $2 million and also provide benefits to the local biodiversity and to the local ecosystem. And of course, we chose the less expensive solution. Sometimes the answers are very obvious to companies like ours. But a lot of times the answers aren't very obvious because we don't necessarily understand ecosystem services in the financial terms that can help me make decisions better as a company manager. In this case, it was very easy for me to say $2 million wetland versus $40 million capital structure. That's an easy replacement cost ecosystem services valuation. But many of the other valuations around ecosystem services are far more complex and have methods that are very subjective. And we recognized that we needed to provide some better methods to be able to analyze and value ecosystem services to the extent possible. Now, we can't put a value on everything. There will be species that we cannot value in economic terms. There will be ecosystem functions that we cannot value in specifically economic terms. But the more that we can value nature in terms that everyone understands, that would be economics, the better we're going to be able to broaden the audience of people who will make better decisions to preserve and enhance biodiversity and to preserve and enhance ecosystems. Let me tell you a little bit how we're going about this with Dow and the Nature Conservancy. We have three approaches to the 5-year collaboration with which we're investing $10 million. The first is to do some work on the ground. Boots on the ground is what the Nature Conservancy likes to say about this. We're selecting 3 pilot sites, which are locations at which the Dow Chemical Company has operations, and we're analyzing the impacts and the dependencies that we have on ecosystem services using tools like what Craig mentioned earlier, the Ecosystem Services Review, and looking at how we can value those ecosystem services on which we depend and on which we're impacting. 3 pilot sites, we've begun work at 2 already, and I'll get to that in just a moment. The second part of our approach is a top-down approach, where we recognize that we need to change the way that the company does financial valuation. And so what we've done is we've gathered we call it within Dow, work process leaders from across our functions, our businesses, and our geographies into what we call a focal point network. These people are gathered right now focused on the collaboration. They're from finance, they're from research, they're from Latin America, they're from China, they're from our various business units, and they're watching what we're doing with our collaboration so that when we bring new science of valuation to them, they're ready to bring it into the way that we do work within the company. As a chemical manufacturer, we have to be a very disciplined organization. Our operating discipline management system is what we're working with and having to refine as we have new science that the Nature Conservancy and we will be developing together.
And then we want to make sure that everyone profits to the extent possible from our collaboration. Some of the work that we're doing is confidential to our company, but most of the work will be published in peer-reviewed journals so that other people can test what we've done and can work with what we're doing to advance the science further. Let me tell you a little bit about the first pilot site that we're working on. The first pilot site really shouldn't be called a pilot at all. It's Dow's Texas operations site focused on Freeport, Texas, which is right on the Gulf Coast, as you'll see in some maps in just a moment, and even on this map here where you can see the red arrow that points to Freeport. This is not a small site. Freeport makes about $10 billion a year of chemicals, plastics, and other kinds of materials that are essential to the company. About 20% of Dow's production comes from this particular site. We analyzed the impacts and the dependencies that this site has on ecosystems and ecosystem services. And we chose to analyze 3 dependencies that are critical to Dow's success at this site: fresh water, coastal natural hazard protection, and air pollution mitigation. And we're looking at reforestation as one tool towards air pollution mitigation. Let me go into a little bit more detail on each of these 3 parts of our